So, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do something that I don't think I've ever done on my channel before. I'm going to review a video. Now, this video is called Jurassic Road, and it is a documentary. It is a documentary that's available on Amazon, and it's available in English and in German. So if you buy the DVD, you can also watch the English version. And it was shot in 2015 over the course of almost 9 weeks. Where a group of 4 people decided to get a very old camper van, which at the time was 25 years old, and drove from a small town in Hesse in Germany all the way across the eastern part of the EU, through Kazakhstan, through Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, into China, and ended up in Sichuan province in a city called Zigong to pick up an animatronic dinosaur. Now that sounds completely out there and crazy, and a lot of people will say it is, and I think it is a crazy endeavor which I would never have undertaken, but which I wholeheartedly support because I think it's an amazing idea, and the video that they made is just as amazing. So who are these people? Well, the writers are Nicolas Mendrek and Mayri Stritter, who are very, very well-known people in the German RPG scene, and I would probably say also European RPG scene. They have done a lot of documentaries, playthroughs, let's plays. They are at cons. They produce their own content. Mayri has written at least 2 role-playing games that I'm aware of. She's written most of the content for Deponia, and she's also got her own system called Lemna. She's also at the moment working with other people on a simplified version of TDE, The Dark Eye, Das Schwarze Auge. And you can see playthroughs of that simplified system on their channel as well. And I will link to their German channel and their English channel below this video so that you guys can check out what they're doing. She and her husband have also been translating for various RPGs, like I believe that they've been working on Shadowrun. They've definitely worked on things for The Dark Eye, and their credits are numerous. They've edited loads of stuff for Das Uhrwerk, which is a German role-playing publishing company. And what they were doing at the time in 2015, amongst other things, was they were making a movie for Space 1889, which is a steampunk role-playing game, and they were making a steampunk movie for which they required a dinosaur. And so they were looking for a company that builds dinosaurs because they decided that CGI was going to be too expensive to make it really good and look good in the film. So they decided that if they had something tangible, something real, it would first of all provide them with the old school look that they were going for, but also it would be a lot cheaper. And they found a company in Zigong. Zigong is a city that I'd never heard of, but it's very, very famous for its dinosaur park because apparently millions of years ago there was a huge river and loads of dead dinosaur bodies were swept down that river and basically settled in the basin of that river at that spot. And over the years, they all fossilized. Over the millions and millions of years, they fossilized. And so when you go there, you can see a huge museum where you see dinosaur bones in situ, like they were found. So they've just been brought to the surface, and you can see them, which is fascinating. And there is footage of this in the movie as well, of course. And of course they've got a dinosaur park where they have like dinosaur sculptures, and there's also some footage of that, and it's kind of like this lush countryside, very green, and you just see those huge dinosaurs essentially walking around. They don't walk, they're sculptures, but it really looks very, very interesting and very, very fascinating. And there is a company there and they make animatronic dinosaurs, which they sell to Asia and the United States. And so they contacted them and said, well, we need a dinosaur, blah, blah, blah. And they said, yeah, we can build you one and we can ship it to you, and it's going to take months because you would have to take a ship and, it goes around probably, I don't know if it would go through the Suez Canal, but if it doesn't, then you have to go around South Africa. So it's going to take a while. And they decided that this was going to take too long. And so they kind of had this wacky idea of driving there, 11,000 kilometers, so over 16,000 miles, and back again. And so they decided to fundraise for this. Well, not really fundraise for it, but they basically got a production company that said, we're going to produce the film that you're going to make, and that probably went a long way towards financing the trip itself. And of course it was self-financed. They had to buy a camper van that was big enough to hold the people that were going there, and they had like 5 people to begin with, but then one dropped out, so it was 4 in the end. And I think you need 4 people because essentially, you know, you need more than one driver, and you know, there's strength in numbers as well. And one of them is I don't know if he's an electrical engineer or something, or I don't know, but basically he was supposed to look after the parts that are not necessarily the engine, because he's not an automobile engineer or mechanic or anything like that, but you know, he works with technology. And so they bought this van, which was at the time 25 years old, so it's now 30. And they bought it because first of all it was cheap, but also secondly because they believed, and rightly so in my opinion, that back then there wasn't as much electronic crap in the car. It was still a mechanical thing, and mechanical things are more easily repaired if you're in the middle of nowhere and you have like this one garage with this one mechanic who's like 100 years old and who's been repairing cars since the Second World War, because he's seen it all. And so they set out and first drove across the eastern part of the EU. They went up to the Baltic Sea, and then they entered Russia. And then they drove to Moscow, where they met another YouTuber who's got a YouTube channel, or back then he had a YouTube channel about board gaming. So very close to my heart, of course, because that's where I originally come from, board games. And basically they spent some time with him. They did an interview as well. And it was 2015, and this is very important because we're now in 2020, and lots of things that are in this film turned out to be quite political, although the intention of the film was not to be political at all. It was going to be a road documentary, a road movie. But even this guy said, well, you know, he would rather leave Russia. I was going to say the Soviet Union, Russia. Because of the political situation, because it was getting more and more tense. 5 years on, Putin has managed to strengthen his autocracy even more, and it looks like he will still be in power in 5 years' time. So he has managed to overcome all of the adversity, which even in Russia states that you cannot just put yourself into the position of supreme leader of the country until you die. But he's now essentially taken another step towards becoming an autocrat for life. And so even in 2015, the situation wasn't as good. Then they went through Kazakhstan, and then they went through Kyrgyzstan. And of course, at some point, you will enter China. And again, I would like to stress that this was never meant to be a political movie. It was meant to be a movie about 4 people driving through some of the most beautiful spots on earth, and the vistas captured in this movie, and also the soundtrack that was provided for the movie are stunning. I can really recommend it, even if you just want to see really nice views of places that you will probably never see for yourself. So this not being a political movie, this not being a group of people who are seeking out dissidents, that are trying to talk to political prisoners or to people who are politically active, still turned into a very political movie, which is why I think it is an important film beyond the nerd appeal that it has to me, and beyond the natural beauty appeal that it has to me. But it turned out that even trying not to be political. Even just documenting a journey in a country like China, which is a dictatorship, becomes a political endeavor. And I won't even talk about bureaucracy, because you find this everywhere. I mean, things like, you want a visa extended, you have to have an address, like a hotel. You cannot have a hotel room if you don't have a valid visa. So it's like a catch-22. Their visa runs out due to no fault of their own, and they can't leave the country on time. So they're kind of stuck. But it's the constant watchfulness of the state. So, for example, there are cameras everywhere. Their car, not only theirs, but everyone's cars, are constantly being photographed. There is one time that they have to leave fingerprints with whoever took the fingerprints when they entered. I think it was some kind of museum or tourist attraction. So that is absolutely incredible. And towards the end, when things really start to fall apart, and it's a very, very interesting part of the movie, it turns out that it's actually those vilified Uyghurs in Kyrgyzstan, on the border to Kyrgyzstan, that helped them. So they've got a guide. So apparently when you travel through China, you have to have a local guide. You can't just go on your own. And so they have a Chinese person or two, a driver and a guide, who basically take him through China. And then when they're on their way back, they get a local guide just in the area where the Uyghurs live, and he's a Uyghur. And it turns out that they are most helpful, that they really try to help them make a difference to the situation that they're in, whereas the Chinese person basically turns out to be kind of lying to them, because they are really under time pressure. They need to leave the country, and he's like, I will take you the shortest route, and he doesn't, and they find out, because it becomes quite apparent as they enter ever higher reaches of the mountains, that they end up in a snowstorm. They have a camper van that's not meant to be driven through snowstorms. It's really, really dangerous as well. And then he basically confesses that he was telling them he was going to take them the shortest route, but he couldn't, because he had given their route, pre-communicated their route to the local police officers, and they couldn't deviate from that route. So instead of just saying, well, this is the situation, I'm sorry, we have to take the long route, he just keeps telling them lies, which may be a cultural thing, but which for Germans is simply unacceptable. And it is also something where maybe this is the case, and maybe you cannot go back to the police and say, okay, we need to change the route because we are behind schedule and we really need to leave the country. Maybe that's not possible. If it isn't, then that's another thing that I will chalk up to bureaucracy, which you can find in various countries around the globe, and Germany is no exception, because Germany can be very bureaucratic. But it's this kind of like being let down, being led astray and being lied to, which is the unacceptable part. And that was 2015. And even then, it was quite clear that the Uyghurs are not at the same level as the Han Chinese. They were already treated as second-class citizens. And since 2015, the situation has deteriorated even more. Which is also why I think this will stand the test of time, because it is a snapshot of the political situation, although it wasn't meant to be a political film at all, of China at the time, and to a lesser degree of Russia, because Russia is only mentioned in passing. Now, I highly recommend the movie, because I think it's going to be interesting simply because it's an awesome idea, and to just watch what happens. Secondly, I think it's an interesting travel log, because at least I got shown areas that I will never see for myself, and they were captured in amazing beauty. And thirdly, I think it is a socio-political snapshot of a region which, alongside the rest of the world, is tumbling ever deeper into nationalist, populist, autocratic rule. Because since 2015, we've had a really weird election in the United States, which to me proves that the United States is not a democratic country anymore, because they've decided to vote for a nationalist moron who's a racist and a misogynist person. And then, of course, we've had Brexit. We've had Boris Johnson trying to grab power from the British Parliament by sending them into a vacation period, which turned out to be illegal. But then he was returned to power with an absolute majority, which also shows that populism and nationalist jingoism is on the rise. And we see the same in Poland, in Brazil, Hungary, and even here in Ireland. We have a general election in a week. And I got a leaflet from somebody saying, he's an independent candidate and his message is Ireland for the Irish. Like hell will I vote for him. But it just shows that what they saw in 2015 in countries that we know are not democratic is now spreading and has spread across the globe like a disease. And I think, interestingly enough, when they returned, that was in 2015 in October, I want to say, that was pretty much at the height of the so-called refugee crisis in the European Union. Why was there a crisis? Well, people had been fleeing from war-torn countries in the Middle East, which some European countries were involved in. They were propping up different governments, and of course the United States was bombing left, right and centre. And so these people paid lots of money to cross the Mediterranean Sea, and they had been doing this, only not in those numbers, for a long time. And they had all, or most of them, had stranded in Italy and had been calling for help. And there had been ships sent out to ensure that the people at least didn't drown, and lots of them still drowned. And then a decision was made because the situation was untenable. And the German Chancellor decided to open the borders to let people in, to take pressure off countries like Hungary, like Italy, like Greece, where all of these people had ended up. And it led to this huge outcry in Germany. And of course, millions of people flooding into a country can be considered a flood, and they can be considered a threat. But the alternative is to let them die. And last week we marked 75 years of Auschwitz being freed by soldiers. 70 years after Auschwitz was freed, people were still and again saying things like "the boat is full," which was a slogan that was used during the Second World War to keep out Jewish refugees or migrants, because at the time they weren't necessarily fleeing, they were planning on leaving Germany because they saw that things were going badly. And to me personally, this is an even stronger problem, because if you look at my history, I'm a migrant. I left Germany for economic reasons, because 15 years ago, 16 years ago, there were no jobs. I could have decided to stay, go on the dole, but I couldn't. I was unable to do this. I was unable to accept this. I wanted to contribute. I didn't just want to sit there and be paid for doing nothing, and the situation looked very dire. So I and many others of my age left. And we came to this country. Lots of us did. Lots of people went to Ireland. Some went to Britain. They're now cursing themselves, a lot of them, and are leaving again. But we were welcomed here. But we were, if you like, running away from economic distress. And the only reason why we could do this without having to pay someone to smuggle us across a border is because we live in the European Union, which the UK has decided to leave, which allows us freedom of movement. And I think one of the last sound bites that Mairi speaks in the movie is testament to this. She says one of the things that she's come to cherish even more is the fact that she is born here, and by here she means Germany, because she's pointing to the ground and she's standing in Hamburg at the time, where nobody prosecutes her because of her looks, her name, or her religion, and where she has stability and where she has all of these features that we associate with a free country where you have a rule of law that everyone has to follow. And I think this is really one thing that I took from this movie, and it's a stark mirror that we can look into to look at us and see ourselves and say, we actually have it really good, and we should be very, very careful to judge people who make a decision to leave a country, because people who leave China, let's say, if they manage to get out, Uyghurs, for example, yes, they would also probably be running away from an economically bad situation, because I don't think there is some signs that they are not only second-class citizens, but they also are marginalized and may not be well off at all. They may be living on the margins of society. So that's definitely one side of it. But they're not running away because they want to, but they're running away out of necessity. And I think lots of us run away out of necessity. Only when we do it in the European Union, we call it migration. And it's suddenly okay. But if you come from a different country that's not in the EU, you're suddenly a migrant. And you're looked down upon simply because you want a better life. And I think a better life can be anything, and it can also just mean that you want to live in a country where the rule of law applies. And so I really recommend this video. I actually don't know how much I paid for it. I think it's about 25 euros maybe. You can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Amazon Prime to rent it out and to watch it. You don't have to get the physical DVD. And I hope that you guys get this movie and watch it. And I hope that maybe one day there will be a crowdfunding to have the diary that they kept published, because I would definitely want to read it again, because I've only got it as a Word doc, and it's I have to read it at the PC because it's way too long to print it off, but it's a really good read as well. So Jurassic Road, from 1995, from 2015, and it's available on Amazon. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.